these things. I got you. Okay, super. Well, good. Good morning. Good morning. We'll go ahead and start the meeting. Call this meeting to order, the Small Business Committee. At this time, I'd like to call on Chairman Steve Tolver to say the blessing.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day we have, and we pray, Lord, for wisdom and guidance in all that we do as we look to make decisions based on what's best for the people of the state of Georgia. For it's in Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to this committee meeting today, and we'll go ahead and get started. First on the agenda is we've got Chris Bennett. Okay. All right, what do I know? Which one? Podium.
Are we good? There we go. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and thank you so much. My name is Ellen Reynolds, and I'm here today with the privilege of representing Wonder School. Wonder School is a sort of innovative startup that is working on innovative platforms to help bring together the needs of the early childhood education community. We know that in order for Georgia to stay one of the top state in which to do business, we're going to need a strong workforce that can go to work, and the child care industry is a foundational piece of that. What we're seeing is that we have child care deserts across Georgia, and that part of that is due to needing a teacher workforce. That it's, when you can go to Target and work for $15 an hour and not be subject to 450 rules that you have to know and memorize, sometimes it's more enticing just to go work at Target. So I have Tamarie here with me, and she's going to introduce herself and give you just a little bit of an overview. Amy Jacobs, when she was testifying for the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Education, testified to the fact that we really do have a teacher recruitment problem, and we believe we have a solution for that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tamarie.
Good morning, and thank you for your time. I'm just going to pull up the PowerPoint to make sure that I can get this going. Great. Can I do with full screen? Why am I missing that? It's probably right in front of my face. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I know it is early. I know everybody's incredibly busy, and thank you for the great introduction to Wonder School, Ellen. My name is Tamarie Adams, and I am on Wonder School's state partnership team. Prior to joining the Wonder School team, I spent about 15 years in the education space, including 10 years working in nonprofits, and really appreciate your time today to talk about an identified need in the childcare space, which is teacher recruitment. Before jumping into some of the solutions that Wonder School is incorporating in states across the country, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the work that we do. Feel free to interrupt me with any questions. I will try to answer questions that we've gotten in the past as I'm doing the presentation, but very much appreciate your time. So quickly about Wonder School. We were founded in 2016 to help address the child care crisis that we see across the country. One of the things that I think makes Wonder School unique, and it's actually one of the reasons that I wanted to be part of the organization, was a recognition that child care providers are really operating small businesses. There's more than just teaching that goes into child care, and really solving the child care crisis is making sure that providers are supported. So Chris Bennett, our founder, really set out to create this ecosystem that empowers early education providers to build sustainable small businesses. And by doing that, you can enable families to easily find high-quality childcare, and then also get working families back to work because you have access to childcare in your communities. So today we're going to focus on teacher recruitment. That is an identified need by the department, but I also just wanted to talk about the solutions that Wonder School does provide. It's really an end-to-end solution so that providers can open and sustain their businesses. So we do new child program creation. A lot of states are encountering issues with childcare access. And so we can go out and identify individuals that are interested in opening childcare, either a center or an in-home facility. We also have a platform that supports those providers. How do you make this a profitable business? How do you invoice and communicate with parents? It's not as big of an issue with child care centers, but when you're thinking about in-home facilities, substitute teachers, we call it subpool, it's a huge issue. It hadn't occurred to me, but when we get sick, if you want to take a vacation, a lot of us have access to those vacation days, or if you're teaching in a K through 12 school, you have substitutes. That's not always the case if you are running a child care center within your home, and so we have subpools where you can easily match with substitutes available in your communities. Teacher recruitment, which I will talk a little bit more about in just one second. And then one of the other things is we have a child care finder. Some states have really great platforms where families can find the child care that is available in their communities. Others don't, and so we can make it easily searchable where you can actually set up appointments with child care providers to tour their home and also understand what their rates are before you actually go to select and tour that facility. Subsidy management, employer support. We know that access to child care is a big issue for business, and so we work individually with employers also and kind of act as a concierge service in helping their employees find child care. And then also we do our work in TriShare. Just a few highlights of the states that we are working in. This actually needs to be updated. We recently partnered with West Virginia, but we are working in 10 states. States use different models. Some use a few of our solutions at once. Some states focus on things like teacher recruitment where there's really that identified need. So we're in 10 states across the country, and then also doing a lot of local work in cities and counties. So today, really to talk about the problem that has been identified in Georgia, which is teacher recruitment. One of the interesting things is before we got into the teacher recruitment space, we interviewed over 100 child care providers, and teacher recruitment was the biggest issue that was identified by child care centers. As you know, and as Ellen had mentioned, child care centers often have strict student-to-teacher ratios, often around 5 students to 1 teacher. So if you're not able to meet those ratios, you can't keep your center doors open. And those empty classrooms lead to closures that we're seeing across the country, and also can represent up to $500,000 in annual revenue. And it's a huge issue. It's not a little thing. We call it a hair on fire problem, where there's 40% turnover across the industry. And we've had child care providers report that they spend up to 20 hours a week filling staffing needs, and on average it takes about 2 months to fill a position. So right now, the current options for a lot of child care providers at centers are finding teachers on Indeed, and I just realized we are missing a D on the PowerPoint, and so I will correct that, but on Indeed, Craigslist, and ZipRecruiter. Craigslist, I don't think I need to even talk about. It's not a trusted resource, and there's often poor results, which is not surprising. ZipRecruiter, again, there's child care providers have reported kind of unserious candidates, and so a lot of providers are looking at Indeed, and there's a few issues with that. One, there's no pre-screening involved with Indeed. Anybody can apply, and it's only about 25% of people that actually apply are actually qualified for the positions. And then also they have a high pricing model and a pricing model that often changes. And some of the feedback that we've gotten is that you are paying per identified candidate. And if you don't either select or deselect a candidate, sometimes within 72 hours, you're charged. And so what I want to talk about now is the Wonder School solution, which is our teacher recruitment platform, and it's the first of its kind, connecting child care providers to job seekers that are already pre-screened. And so what we do is we pre-screen teachers for child centers. We do the outreach through targeted marketing, working and partnering with universities. And so you have a pool of searchable teachers on our website so that we can also white label if we are partnering with a government partner. And so you have two sides of the coin, where you have that qualified teaching pool and then the child care providers that are looking for teachers for their centers. You can search by zip code area, what you're looking for. And there's also an algorithm that matches to ensure that there's a good employer-employee fit. We found that we have been able to reduce hiring time by up to 80%. So you can take that 2 months that I had referenced earlier and bring that down to often days where you're matching. And it really simplifies and accelerates that hiring process. And right now, I believe we have almost 100,000 teachers on our platform. And this is just one of the testimonials from one of the teacher child care providers with her experience with Wonder School. So prior to joining the Wonder School platform, she reported spending up to 20 hours a week working on staffing issues. And within a month of joining the platform, she was able to actually hire 6 teachers for her center. And so one of the things that we seek to do is really address the whole child care ecosystem. I talked about our solutions earlier, and teacher recruitment is just one of those pieces. A lot of the states that we work in will take one of the solutions and then slowly add on. But we really want to kind of make running a child care center, allow the providers to do that on autopilot so they can really focus on serving children. One of the other things that we do is we offer bundled services, and so teacher recruitment was an identified need in Georgia, not so much subpool at this moment, but a lot of the work that we can do is address the needs for also the childhood centers in-home with subpool, and then also the larger centers with our teacher recruitment, and so we can bundle to make sure that everyone is set up for success. This is just an example of what subpool looked like in Mississippi. I'm going to actually skip over that because it's not direct to teacher recruitment. But what we are able to do is we can either do local but also statewide and also working in rural communities. And what the essence of our work is really to make sure that we have meaningful impact. We believe that when early childhood centers are treated like the small businesses that they are and are sustainable, more centers are able to open, to grow and expand and serve more families and get more working families back into the workforce. That is the presentation. I tried to make it as quick as possible. I would love to answer any questions that you might have. And one thing that I did want to say, one of the biggest questions we get is, where do you get the teachers? And I talked about the partnerships with universities and targeted recruiting. We do not recruit from teachers at current childhood centers. That would defeat the purpose, but that's a question that we get. So we're not recruiting people that are already employed in childhood centers. So I just want to make sure that that was clarified.
Cool, thank you. We've got 2 questions, and who's number 1? All right. Representative Washburn?
Thank you.
Presently have a daycare center business listed in Macon and in Middle Georgia. There are several locations. And one of the things that I hear from her constantly is the issue of not being able to find people. And so I'm very interested in what you're having to say there. The whole thing is a chain reaction of people needing child care so they can go back to work.
Number 12.
This lady operating, and she is a very good operator and has a very successful business, but is almost ready to just walk away because she can't find people to help. And the vacant classroom comment you made is certainly significant. I am curious, though, so who pays you? How do you get paid to do what you do?
So there's 2 models. When Wonder School actually opened its doors, it was working directly with child care providers, and so they were paying for the services. About 4 years ago, we started partnering with government. When you recognize, there's been that recognition that child care is a workforce issue, and especially when a lot of these child care providers are already operating on very slim margins to pay for extra services, even though they will pay off in the end, is not always feasible. And so it's 2 models. The providers can pay us and work with us directly, but we also work with states and have state contracts where those services are being paid for by the state as part of workforce initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you. One follow-up, Mr. Chair. Follow-up. When you're mentioning these child care businesses, is that Is that synonymous with daycare centers, or are there smaller operations that are in-home operations that only keep a few kids?
Both. And so we work with both in-home family care providers and then larger centers. And so one of the things that we do is try to get very familiar with the pain points of different types of providers. So when I had talked about the subpool, we realized that substitutes were a huge issue for the smaller daycare in-home providers, whereas larger centers often were able to get coverage day to day, but the teacher recruitment was the pain point there, but we work with both.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms.
Representative Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry that I came in late, but what are your requirements for the teachers to teach in your centers, daycare centers?
The state requirements. And so it very much follows whatever the state requirements are to teach in a child care center. Those are the requirements that the teachers on the platform are vetted for. So it looks different in every state. But one of the bonuses of working with Wonder School is when a child care provider goes on the platform, they know that that teacher has already met all of those requirements. So they've been pre-screened.
Okay, that's the same for like Kids Are Kids. I don't think they're still open though, but that was one. And at home, both of them have to have certified teachers.
So the requirements are often a bit different. And so if we are working with an in-home and we're looking for a substitute, if it's a different set of requirements, they've been pre-screened to those states' requirements.
I can help you a little bit.
I'm sorry. I don't
Sorry,
know that.
I'm more of the Georgia expert. Honestly, if you are talking about Georgia pre-K, you have to have a bachelor's to be a lead teacher. Outside of that, the only requirement that we really have to be a child care teacher is to pass the background check, which is a very comprehensive fingerprint background check. Then once you get in the door, there are trainings you must get within certain periods of time, like CPR and first aid and those kinds of things. But Georgia is one that it has a low threshold to get into the business, but what I would tell you is that's needed, because if we add a lot of requirements prior to even entering the profession, because they're going to be supervised, if we add a lot, and I know the Kids Are Kids situation, there's still another 20 schools that are open in Georgia, but yeah, so that there are very few requirements to start working as a teacher in the early childhood education industry unless you're specifically talking about Georgia pre-K.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, can I ask one more question? Okay, I used to serve on the board for Shelter in Arms. Are you familiar with their model?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I know that they do a lot of in-house training for other, not just for their workers, but for others. So do you all require that they go back? That's where they go and they get. Is it Bright Star or Bright?
Yeah, Bright from the Start, Department of Early Care and Learning, and I am a lobbyist representing Wonder School, so I don't want to. I'm just going to speak to my experience, but please know the department. I'm not trying to speak on their behalf, but so the department has increasingly, and especially through, I think the pandemic, realized that you have a lot of training that is necessary to, top to bottom, whether it's health and safety, which they've always done, or whether it's actually on the economics of running a child care business. So they have been putting more and more and more of that out there for free. But if you'd like to go to Sheltering Arms, that's a place you can go as well. So it's offered across multiple places, but Sheltering Arms would not be the only place one could go get that training.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Good. All right, Miss Betsy, you're up.
Okay.
Good morning, y'all. Okay. So my name is Betsy Bradfield. I am the Advocacy Director for the Georgia Association of Realtors, for those who do not know me. And I'm so excited to have with us today some of our best and brightest in the real estate industry. So they will go after me and speak about what they do. But we have Nakia Brooks, who is from Braselton, Georgia, and he is the broker owner of Heartland Real Estate. I have Jimmy Whaley from your hometown, Americus, Georgia, who's the broker owner of Whaley Realty. And I have Kim Eiler Morgan, who works with Savannah Regional Area Coldwell Banker Commercial. So, and then Dale, of course, Representative Washburn will close.
Yeah, I think Dale's going to be the closer
Yeah,
today.
you'll be the closer. Thank you so much for having us today. Quick note, Realtor Day at the Dome was yesterday, and we had over 1,000 realtors visit the state capitol, so thank you so much in advance, or not in advance, thank you for helping them and meeting with them and coming and saying a few words. We really appreciated it. And if they wandered around aimlessly, I apologize. We tried, but they were great. They had a great time. So a little bit about the association. We have 48,000 realtor members across the state of Georgia. To be a real estate agent and to be a realtor are not the same thing. To be a realtor, you sign on to a code of ethics to hold yourself to a higher standard than a typical real estate agent. Real estate agents are just licensees that have to pass the exam. Our members are people who pass the real estate exam and then hold themselves to a higher standard and join the association. We have 50 local boards all across the state. We have probably a board in your area that's comprised of our realtors, and we have been around for 105 years that we've been advocating for private property rights, home ownership, accessible housing, real estate licensure, protecting consumers, and ensuring that we have thriving communities all across our state. We represent rural, suburban, urban, and everything in between. And our members specialize in everything you can imagine. So residential sales, commercial properties, we have large land tracts, trees, timberland, ag land, lot development, and more. So wanted to give you guys a state of housing in the state of Georgia. We provided you, everyone that we have, with a blue packet that has your specific counties in it. So we do what we call housing indicators. So we record all of recent listings and sales in your area. So we pulled all of your counties, and then we also gave you the State of Housing 2024 annual report where you can see all of our statistics for last year. But I don't need to tell you this. You're very much aware that current Georgians cannot afford to buy a home. It has gotten out of control. So we pulled the median sales price across all housing types in 2024. And the reason that we use the median is that it is less affected by swings in low housing costs and really, really expensive McMansion housing costs. So that's why we use median rather than average. And the cost for a single family detached home was $370,000, an average median sales price for 2024. And for a 2-bedroom home, that was $259,000. For a 3-bedroom, $305,000. And for a 4-bedroom house, the median sales price last year was $449,000. And I know a lot of you and a lot of people are generally looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. That's probably the most common demand. A 3-bedroom, the difference between a 3 and a 4-bedroom is $144,000. So the market is still incredibly hot. I know, for a lot of us, the best market we've seen in many years was 2021, and it has honestly continued to go up since then. It has not dropped at all. And we know this because we track the percentage of list price received, which means how much the buyer offered and how much the seller was willing to take. And right now we're tracking that at 96.3% of list price. During 2021, that was like 120%. So that meant that people were offering, $10,000 over asking and getting the home. But now we're still at 96%, which means that the seller is still asking a high price and the buyer is definitely willing to pay it. So a healthy housing market, generally 4 to 6 months worth of supply means it is a healthy market. This is the number of months it takes for all of the current homes on the market to sell if nothing else was added. More than 4 months, we call that a seller's market. Less than 6 months is a buyer's market. Right now in Georgia, we have 3.4 months of inventory for single-family homes, which means we are still very much strong in a seller's market. We do not have enough housing. Year in review, you have this in your folder. The average sales price increased over 5% to $439,000. So what I said before about the average being more susceptible to the swings, so that was why it's at $439,000. We had over 34,000 homes for sale, which was an increase in 2023. And our most in-demand housing category were homes priced in the $150,000 to $250,000 price range. They are hard to find these days, and so when they do get on the market, they are in demand. That's what everybody wants. And we know this because it had the shortest average days on market until the sale. And our top 5 change in inventory, so this is our predictors for growth, where we're seeing the most homes being added, where more than likely citizens will be moving, is Augusta, 320% growth. Atlanta Metro is around 62%, the city of Atlanta is 36%, Macon 17.3%, and Savannah is around 6%. So our area median historical prices, like I mentioned before, the hottest real estate market we've seen in quite some time was 2021, and I would like to draw your attention to the figure here on the right that says change from 2020, because this shows you that we are still actually doing better. Houses are more expensive than they were in 2020 and 2021. So in our most populous areas, so that city of Atlanta, Atlanta Metro, Savannah, Columbus, Macon, Augusta, prices are double-digit increasing from 20 and 2021. So to give you guys an idea, in Savannah, 50% home prices doubled since 2021. Economic development and housing, obviously they are very much linked. We have been the #1 state to do business for 11 years running, which has resulted in incredible, unprecedented economic growth for the state of Georgia, but where are these people going to live? We don't even have enough housing for current Georgians to live. So where are we going to put all the future Georgians that are expected to fill these jobs? I would like to give a shout out to the governor, though, who introduced his rural workforce housing grants a couple of years ago. So those grants go to the areas of the state who are desperately trying to fund infrastructure. Infrastructure is one of the leading reasons why housing is struggling to be built. It is incredibly expensive to lay water, sewer, and everything needed to put homes on properties. And so his rural workforce housing grants will be able to give those funds to local governments in rural areas who are trying to build out that infrastructure to prepare for this growth. We have worked on a ton of GIR advocacy in the housing space for the past several years. You have all heard from us at some point, but one of the things I would like to point out is our Housing Access and Affordability Task Force. We previously had a study committee led by Representative Washburn, where we brought in several people and talked about the housing affordability crisis that we're currently dealing with. But then after that, we created this task force with some of our friends that you see on these slides, with the home builders, the Chamber of Commerce, Habitat for Humanity, ACCG, and GMA, and we all came together to try and develop some solutions. You saw those solutions last year in the Choice Act, which was ultimately unsuccessful, but it did bring us all together. And one of the ultimate goals of the Choice Act was to explain that local governments have a lot of really difficult restrictions that cause housing to be more unaffordable. So when a local government places unduly zoning rules and regulations on a property, it is incredibly difficult for a builder to be able to build an affordable home, which means they have to price that home higher in order to make a profit. They're a business too. They do have to make a profit. So a lot of those zoning issues, but there's also a ton of issues. We can't control interest rates. That's a federal problem. We can't touch that. But we are also always working on supply side solutions to build more housing in this state, because that is ultimately where we have to go in order to fix this problem. If you don't know me, there's me. And Jeff Ledford, our External Affairs Officer, and Caitlin Bickett, our Political Affairs Manager. They're here with us today, and I will stand for any questions.
Super. Well, I don't see any questions, so why don't we just move on to...
Yes, please.
we got one. I'm sorry. Number 26. I take that back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the presentation. Really good information. I've got a couple of questions. Is that okay, Mr. Chairman? Okay. One on the average sales price in Georgia, $439,492. Still worries me a little bit from financial and banking, but someone goes to get a loan, pays 10% down. There's the payment on that still $2,700 a month, and we're talking about an average price home in Georgia, and that's $439,000. But thank you for the info for us locally.
Yes.
But in Fannin County, that's $752,000 for the average price of a home where I live.
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of cash. There's still a lot of cash in the market, but it does trouble me a little bit when we're seeing those cash transactions start to go down. So that's still a big worry. I know that what you mentioned with the governor with the affordable housing is a great thing, I believe, but we've got to continue to work on that. And I don't, can you tell me why one bedroom adds $144,000 to the price? Is that the difference between a 3-bedroom and a 4-bedroom?
So that is just what we have. Let me see if I have that slide.
Because you're only talking.
It becomes the extra square footage that goes in the bedroom.
Yeah, but that's 145. That's 12 by 12.
Yeah, but that bedroom's not the only thing that's bigger than
Yeah.
the house.
Yeah.
And it goes from a 1,400-foot house to 1,800-foot house with just one bedroom.
Yeah.
For other, it's got a bonus room, and just things that.
Yeah.
It's just
Seems like a
average.
lot.
That's the reason, and the reason I'm saying that, I've looked at it before. and
Yeah.
That's what it turns out to be. It's like a 3-car garage instead of a 4-car garage, 2-car garage and that type of thing. That's what drives up the average cost and price.
Good,
I
okay.
agree with you.
And one other question, Mr. Chairman, if I could. Can you talk a little bit about any legislation or like impact fees? What are y'all seeing for impact fees?
Yeah, like the school impact fees
Yeah.
bill from Forsyth County. We don't have an official position on it. We are letting our home builder friends lead the charge on that one since they will
Okay.
be most affected. But generally, it is well understood that impact fees do drive up the cost of housing. My general worry with that bill is that it is kind of just like opening the floodgates, and everyone else is going to want to do school impact fees if the Forsyth County one is successful. And I wish it was tied to more of a nexus, because in the state impact fee law, you have to do all these studies and prove that what the impact is going to be. I don't know how you prove that a child is going to move into a house, right? How do I prove that this neighborhood is going to have 45 children? That is kind of difficult. However, you can predict the traffic and the, what it's going to result on the cost of the infrastructure and all of the burden on the infrastructure like water and sewer. But I don't know how you do a nexus and predict children.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Good answer.
Cool. All right, number 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and I really appreciate you providing us individual county data. I just was curious. I live in DeKalb. I see the price change, and it looks like in my area, the median sales price for a home has decreased. And I was interested in the committee. I can't get over that. Fannin County is $700,000 for an average price of a home.
So that's I haven't dug into the individual county by county data that we have, but that is incredibly high. But it's probably due to the fact that it is like a very high tourism and vacation part of the state. For DeKalb County, it probably means that we are building some more supply in DeKalb to bring down the overall cost of housing. But that's from every single level. So think like 1 bedrooms all the way up to 5 bedrooms. So it kind of accepts the swing of all properties. So condos, townhomes, everything, probably more affordable and probably more built in DeKalb than imagine in another more rural area of the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
Cool. All right. I appreciate all the, I know we're going to have to call the questions off because we got 4 more presenters and we'll run out of time. So if you would get offline and speak with Betsy, I'd appreciate that. All right. Who's next, Miss Betsy?
We'll have representative. We'll have Jimmy Whaley from Americas. Sorry.
I didn't know I made it to y'all's level already. Hi, I'm Jimmy Whaley. I'm from Americus, Georgia. Wanted to give you a little update of rural real estate. That's my specialty. I handle Southwest Georgia. I'm born and raised there. So these big numbers that y'all are talking about is not our problem in Southwest Georgia. My median sales price in Sumter County and the other counties that I mainly cover is somewhere around $189,000. That sounds wonderful to most of you, but $189,000 in Sumter County is still a lot of money, right? Well, the main issues we have is in Sumter County and our surrounding counties that I cover, Sly, Chattahoochee, several others. We haven't had a neighborhood built since 2007, period, hard stop. It just doesn't happen. And what that means is that all the homes are degrading. They are failing, they're falling in a lot of areas because we don't have people moving to these new homes because there are none. Unfortunately, how it affects small business is there's so many businesses that have these wonderful people that they want to recruit into our town, and they go live in Warner Robins, or they go live way far away and they drive hour plus every day just to get to work. So the biggest issues for us are the fact that we have not been able to build. And yes, I'm very grateful for Governor Kemp's rural grants that he's done, and I think that can help in the future. But our biggest issue is zoning issues because 55% of Sumter County, you have to have 10 acres to be able to build a home on. Most people can't afford 10 acres. and if you're having to buy 10 acres just to build a home, it is very cost prohibitive. And even in the small areas where you can build on 1 1/4 acres, which is the smallest that you can build on, you still have to have septic and well, and there's a lot of issues that go along with that in rural Georgia. I wanted to speak to your going from 3 to 4. In our area, you would also have to go from 3 to 4, would also incur a huge extra cost because the size of the septic tank is much greater at 4 bedrooms than it is at 3. And so that is one additional cost that I would have to see in my neck of the woods. I'm not going to keep you long. I know that you're on a time crunch. Just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of what it looked like in rural Georgia for real estate.
Good. Do we have any questions?
Yes.
So in the county, you must have a 10-acre
10
minimum lot size to build a house,
Yes,
to get
sir.
a permit.
Yes, sir. And about 10 other percent of the county, you have to have 5. So more than 65% of the county, you have to have at least 5 or 10 acres, and that just makes things very, very difficult. And another issue, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, may I add? Okay. One other thing that goes along with that is unless you own a farm and operate a farm, if you have an accessory dwelling unit, whether it be a pool house or something else, no one besides your family or a farm worker can live there. And that has made it very difficult for a lot of people. I know about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a lady lost her husband, lived on some acreage, really could have used somebody to rent her pool house, which was a very nice pool house that any of us would have probably been just fine staying in. And she's unable to rent it out because for entire Sumter and Sly counties, you cannot rent a dwelling unit, accessory dwelling unit at all. And that became a big problem there as well.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. So, is the governing authority in the county opposed to growth? They do not. They want your county to stay like it is.
Well, I can only speak to what I've been able to say. I've sat in on many zoning meetings. I've begged and pleaded and talked and given all the reasons in the world, and nobody seems to care a whole lot about changing it. They don't like what they believe they have to do to make it allowable is to change the zoning instead of change the rules within the zoning. Mm-hmm. And they say that spot zoning is a massive problem in their opinion.
Mm-hmm. One final comment. We hear that a lot from people who have their home bought. Mm-hmm. And who say, well, we don't want any more houses built in the county. Mm-hmm. They cheerfully forget that somebody built one that they bought to start with, but they don't, well, we want to stay like it is now. We're here. We want to stay like it is. Pardon me, Mr. Chairman, for
Thank you, Dale. All right, number 29.
You said farmland. What you said on the farm, nobody else could live there. What?
So if there's a secondary housing unit, the only other on any part of Sumter County, not in the city.
Is that because it's in conservation, or anybody that's got a farm?
No, anybody. It doesn't have to be in conservation. It can be anywhere, and no one is allowed unless your immediate family or helping on the farm. That is literally how it reads in the zoning.
So if somebody's got 300 acres, they can't let somebody else live on their land. Something don't sound right about that.
Not legally, no, sir.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate that. All right, who's next?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Kim Eiler Morgan, and I'm from out of the Savannah region, so Chatham, Effingham, and Bryan County. You may have heard a little bit about us recently with one of the largest EV plants to come into existence. We are excited about that project and that it's online. So I'm coming to you today from an infrastructure discussion. We hear about the NIMBYs. I know you're all familiar with Not in My Backyard, and the CAVE people, which are Citizens Against Virtually Everything. So that is one of the things with infrastructure that we hear the most, that we should build the roads and the water and sewer that we need before the people are here. Well, the people are here and they do not have a place to live. We have folks that are driving an hour and 10 minutes one way for housing and for their jobs. So one of the issues that we are working to tackle, we formed a joint development authority when the Hyundai plant was a few years before the Hyundai plant, if you remember, the Volvo plant that started our JDA. So we have now been looking at a regional workforce task force with our RISE through the Savannah Economic Development Authority, and we also are looking at that in infrastructure for water and sewer. So we appreciate that the governor has recognized that Southeast Georgia and rural areas need some more water and sewer infrastructure. So we look for that to be very beneficial to what we have needs. I implore each and every one to work with your municipalities, because that is one of the things that we have had to do tremendously in order to get some of these impact fees, some of these costs that contribute to the increases, that if there are ways in which we can work to have those costs lowered, maybe some incentives for developers. Because once you see a development start going vertical, that development has been in existence for 2 to 3 years prior to coming out of the ground. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to remember, just as Representative Washburn just alluded to. When you see someone talk about they don't want that neighborhood in their backyard, well, their neighborhood was a backyard to someone else before, or maybe that was rural farmland to someone before. So I think that's the one thing that we have to stop catering to the 1% that we see on social media and seem to scream the loudest. I think it's something that we as regional can work with, and through the state, I think there's opportunity for us to collaborate together for better infrastructure opportunities. Thank you for your time today.
You've got one question. Number 24.
No, I didn't.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Cool.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Nakia Brooks, and I have the pleasure of actually serving as Vice President of Governmental Affairs for this Georgia Association of Realtors. So I get to see all over the state what our members are doing. I am a broker and owner of Heartland Real Estate out of Beaufort, Georgia, North Gwinnett, but I live in Brazelton, Georgia. And I moved to Brazelton, Georgia in 2001. I was a police in Gwinnett County, and I had to get out of Gwinnett County because you can't police where you live. And so it was pretty much country land out there then. I could get off the interstate at Chateau Alon and get to my house in about 6 minutes. I can't get to my house from the interstate in about 45 minutes now because the infrastructure of growth, and we didn't do the infrastructure ahead of time. And so that's one of the biggest problems I see with our members across the state is that infrastructure. We have to have growth. We have to be prepared for what's going to happen, but we also have to have that housing that's there. One of the biggest problems we're seeing is permitting. I was the president of the second largest realtor board in the state of Georgia in 2023. It's Northeast Atlanta Metro Association of Realtors, and our members spent $600,000 for a 1 acre lot right on the backside of the Gwinnett County Courthouse. We bought that land that had a already existing ability to put a 14,000 square foot building. City of Lawrenceville, we gave them our plans in 2023 for an 8,000 square foot building, 4,000 square feet upstairs and downstairs, and it's 2025 and we still don't have those permits. Our members have spent over $600,000 trying to get permits just to build a building that was already approved. But the city has come back and said, well, wait a minute, there's a retention pond here, and that needs to be cleaned up before we can do that because you have an easement to that property. Well, for 30 years, the county nor the other participants that had the easement to the retention pond maintain the retention pond, but now that we've bought a $600,000 piece of property, they're expecting us to do it. The permitting is just not feasible. I had another instance where I sold 90 acres in Jackson County to a church, and the church wanted to build a simple, what we call a butler building to house their members in their church. I had to sell the land for about half of what they paid for it because Jackson County required us to do sewer versus a septic tank system, and that sewer system was 170 feet away from where we were at and was going to cost $400,000 just to connect to that, and that church wasn't able to build that building because it was over a third or right at a third of their total building cost. They just had to sell the land. So permitting is huge in the fact that we have to figure out a way to get people who are using the money in the purposes of a local association. They're not for profit. They're spending the members' money to be able to have a property and be able to do the things with people's money, but the permitting doesn't allow that. And or, 2023 we bought that land and that members' money has been sitting for so long. The other thing is, you are right. In Jackson County and where I live in Brazelton, it's $469,000 is the average sales price. I've been doing this 20 years. I personally have sold about 1,200 houses in 20 years. And when you look at that, I sold a property a couple months ago that I sold in Winder, Georgia, the next county over. I sold that house for $68,000 14 years ago. I sold that same identical house with 0 upgrades. It looked the same because I took the pictures when I sold it the first time for $370,000. Now that lady made a lot of money, but the same house that I sold for $300,000 less, it's really hard. We don't have the building, we don't have the ability to do these things. But the root of the cause, in my opinion, what I'm seeing all over the state, is the permitting that it takes to do so many things to build these things. So I appreciate your time. I'll be answering any questions.
No questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Cool. Well, Representative Washburn, you're up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and thanks to all my colleagues and the advocacy people with the Georgia Association of Realtors for doing an excellent job of presenting many of the problems we face. To summarize, I would, and I appreciate the chance to close this today, I want to talk about 2 basic concepts. One is private property rights, because what we're hearing about here is a big restriction and a big impact on private property rights. If Mike Chokas owns 100 acres of land in his home county, and he has a developer that wants to come in and buy that land and develop it and put in the infrastructure to create housing for people that need housing to buy, and your local restrictions keep him from selling that at what his fair market value would be if he was left in an unrestricted situation. Private property rights is foundational for us, and it fits right into all of this that we're talking about. The second thing I'd like for you to look at in summarizing all of this is, if you let the free market work, generally it will work. If you get out of the way and let the free market work, generally it will work. Now back to private property rights for a moment. If you own that farm and you don't want to sell that farm and you insist that you want to sell it for big lots, that is part of your private property rights, and private restrictions are totally different from local government control and overreach and overregulation. You always have to differentiate that. I taught real estate licensing for 20 years, and you always try to teach people the difference between local regulation or any kind of regulation and your right as a private property owner to restrict property the way you want to restrict it. So if you have a subdivision, you have a piece of land you like to subdivide, you've got every right to insist that, well, I'm going to divide it, but I want it to be large lots. I want it to be 5-acre lots. You've got the right to do that. You've got the right to say, I won't allow any houses to be built here that are less than 2,500 square feet in size. Those are called restrictive covenants, and in private property rights, you have the right to do that, of course, unless you're restricted in your right to do that by local government. Suppose Mike, with that 100 acres of land, could maximize the value for his family by allowing it to be subdivided into half-acre lots. If the local government won't let him do that, then they restrict his family's right to sell real estate, private property they own, and use that money as they need to use it. Now, let me quickly point out, I was a county commissioner in my home county when I was a young man, and one of the things I worked hard on was improving our planning and zoning and improving orderly growth. There's nothing wrong with a local government having reasonable control to be sure that growth is orderly. And ladies and gentlemen, we have fought this battle a long time. I fought it two ways. I introduced a bill to try to rein in some of this, and I was bloodied badly by the Georgia Municipal Association and the ACCG. And they're friends of mine, and I understand we all have to fight for the side we're on. So we came back. Betsy talked about it. We let the Georgia Chamber, the Georgia Association of Realtors, the Georgia Association of Home Builders, GMA, and ACCG came to the table to incentivize less restriction and control. GMA cooperated. At the end of the day, the ACCG came in at the last minute without ever saying a word of objection during the whole year they met, and refused to sign a letter in support of what they were trying to do. And what they were trying to do was not that radical at all. There are two issues to reduce cost in housing. Remember again, private property rights, restricted covenants. If you want to build big houses on big lots, you've got the right to do that. But when a 5-member county commission prohibits any lot sizes less than 2 acres. I spoke over in Columbus a few months ago, and that very day, an adjoining county was implementing a rule that said you can't subdivide property unless the lots are 2 acres in size. Ladies and gentlemen, that's counterproductive for accessible housing in Georgia. The way to reduce housing costs foundationally with those two concepts, private property rights and letting the free market work, is to allow higher density. I applaud the governor for what he's doing with the infrastructure. That is a key thing. But in my opinion, we should tie those grants to a requirement that you not require the lots to be any larger than what the health department requires. And if you've got public water and sewer, you can have higher density, meaning you can build more houses to the acre, meaning the cost will go down. The other issue is minimum square footage. These little homes that we are talking about needing to build, 1,000 or 1,200 square feet is a great little home for a first-time home buyer. And if we are requiring larger square footages than that, that is counterproductive to trying to reduce the cost of housing. Now, Representative Chastain talked about this, and Betsy, I think, talked about it, that a lot of reducing monthly payments involves the financing arena. I personally believe it is time for us to increase the amortization schedule from 30 years to 50 years. The value of real estate will continue to increase, and there's nothing wrong with allowing that loan to be amortized over a 50-year period, because I believe the value of the real estate will outrun the debt. And that is one thing we could do. The other thing at the national level in the secondary mortgage market is to go back to something we did back in the 80s when interest rates were extremely high. And that is, we could go to a negative amortization loan, which might sound strange to you. But now we're doing it because of the cost being so great. basic mortgage lending is that you won't be approved for a loan that takes up more than, I believe it's 28% of your income, is what we call the front-end ratio. And that 28%, when you get up to the kind of housing prices we're talking about, we've got to figure out a way to get the monthly payment down for our entry-level buyers. And we have to do that by figuring out ways for the payments to be lowered. I do not believe we are going to see a radical reduction in housing cost unless we can move to much higher density and lower square footage and more efficient square footage. Now, the last thing I'll say about that, we fought 2 bloody battles. We were defeated both times trying to do something about this. We did have a housing study committee with a lot of excellent testimony, and over and over and over again, it is identified that local government regulations, over-regulations, is a problem for us in entry-level housing. Now, I believe in home rule. That's the standard refrain from our local government folks. Home rule is important. I've told all my friends here, after losing those 2 battles, trying it 2 different ways, I said, this is a local issue. Yes, there are problems. Yes, there are things that need to be changed. But I've encouraged them to start lobbying locally to try to get that done rather than it being done at the state level. Because there is a strong opinion that we should not mandate things from state policy that corrects these things. But I will tell you that if we don't start having some success locally to be able to provide housing that is good entry-level housing, then it is time for us to move from the state level. There are times when the state does need to step in to address the problems we have. We all love the growth we're having in Georgia. I forget who exactly said it a moment ago, but these people have to have a place to live. The real estate industry, you know, the opening words of our preamble for the National Association of Realtors is, under all is the land. And the real estate industry, whether it's the commercial or the residential, is one of the engines that drives our economy. But the other thing is this. Our people, the path to financial stability for most families is ownership of a home. And we all know how that works. You buy that home, you start making those payments. We all have to pay for shelter. We can either pay it by being a tenant or we can pay it by being a homeowner. As we pay those payments, the debt goes down and appreciation of the property naturally goes up. And so at the end of 20, 30, 40 years, that little family has a little nest egg there that was basically painless for them to create. We do not want to be a state that has 2 classes of citizens, tenants and homeowners. There's nothing wrong with being a tenant if you choose to be one, but we shouldn't let our economic situation here make it so that you are forced into being a tenant. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll close with that. Thank you for hearing this, and thank you for the attention you're giving to it. I do think it is a situation and a problem that we do need to address in Georgia, and I'm honored to have had the chance to speak to you again about this today. So thank you.
Super. Thank you, Representative Washburn. I appreciate everyone coming to the meeting and also to the presentations. If there are any questions, I don't see any on the screen, but if there are any questions, why don't we adjourn the meeting and we can take them up? Oh, is that okay with you guys? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.